Hello and welcome to the Sustainability Uncovered podcast from Edie. This is the monthly show for anyone working in or curious about climate and environmental action in the private sector. Coming up on today's episode, Oatly's Senior Sustainability Director Caroline Reid walks us through the plant milk brand's plans for 2026 following a sweeping strategy refresh last year.
But what I focus on specifically in my role is what we call at Oatly the Igniting the Movement. So it's how Oatly can use our product and our voice and our brand to influence change beyond the walls of our own company.
And the team at veterinary group IVC Evidensia help us explore this niche sector's specific challenges and opportunities when it comes to reducing environmental impact.
At local level, our veterinary teams are incredibly passionate about the environment in particular. And within a few months of joining, I actually realised I was getting so many vets contacting me saying, what can we do? We really, really want to do things to support and to reduce our environmental impact.
All of that and more on this episode of Sustainability Uncovered. Yes, hello, and a very warm welcome along to the Sustainability Uncovered podcast from Edie, the UK's longest standing business-to-business media brand focused on all things environmental sustainability. As you listen to this, it's coming up for the end of January 2026, and you're listening to the voice of Edie's content editor, Sarah George. Joining me in our rather chilly podcast studio is our senior reporter, Sidhi Mittal. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. It's just really cold here, isn't it?
It is. We should have come down to sort of preheat the studio, to be honest. We're almost too energy efficient down here. So with it having just been Christmas and New Year and everything, it's actually been a little while since I've seen you in person, Sidhi. So what have you been up to? How are you doing?
Yeah, I was away for like a month and I was visiting my family in States. So that was pretty much me last month. But just around that, I was still working. So I wrote this feature on like the kind of green policy updates the government has promised for 2026. So just like a bit of that kind of content, forward facing, what's happening this year, what our audience needs to know, what kind of reporting standards as well that they need to stay on top of. So that kind of content has pretty much kept me busy all throughout December, and now I'm coming back to a pretty busy news desk already.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there was only really like 2 days of gently coming back to work. There's all systems go with, as you say, global news, but then also our own events and membership. So it just feels like it's on to the next thing. But while we're doing that, I did want to kind of combat that in a way and dedicate this episode to not only looking ahead, but looking back as well. So we've lined up 2 guest speaker interviews which not only look at what's ahead for 2026, but look back at what happened last year and why that context is so important. So our first interview today is with Caroline Reid, who is Senior Sustainability Director at Oatly. So for those of you that are interested in, the food and beverage sector, there really never seems to be a dull moment for Oatly. There's always new products, they're always in the news, their comms team are extremely punchy, their public engagement is extremely high key. But 2025 was a really busy time for the sustainability team there in particular, which also had ripple effects in product innovation, communications and other teams. So Oatly launched a new sustainability with targets like reducing emissions intensity by almost 90% by 2050, rolling out sustainable agriculture and regenerative farming across its farmer portfolio, and setting more ambitious targets on water efficiency and sustainable packaging. So it did all that while contending with the ongoing debate in the EU about the naming and branding of plant-based things like milk, sausages, burgers. So this interview covers all of that. Like I said, it partly looks back, it partly looks forward, and it was really interesting. So here is that interview with Caroline in full. Yes, so as Will have just mentioned in the studio, it is a delight to be speaking to Caroline Reid from Oatly for this next part of the podcast, and she is their Senior Sustainability Director. Thank you so much for your time, Caroline. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, and thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
No, thank you for making the time, especially new year, are we deep into 100% go mode yet, or are you still easing back in?
I think I'm a bit of both. I think I'm still got the energy from having some time off, but definitely I'm full in. And I was speaking to someone earlier today and said 2026 is the year of getting stuff done, and that's how I've jumped into the year.
Such January energy. I applaud you for that.
Yeah.
So it's great to be talking about everything that Oatly's up to in terms of sustainability in the year ahead after a really interesting year last year, in my opinion. But before we get really into it, it'd be great to hear, just a little bit more about yourself and your role at the company.
Yeah, so as you said, Oatly, I'm the sustainability director, and like probably many folks in sustainability, I do wear definitely quite a few hats. Um, but what I focus on specifically in my role is what we call at Oatly the igniting the movement. So it's how Oatly can use our product and our voice and our brand to influence change beyond the walls of our own company. So focusing not so much on the doing less bad, but really focusing on kind of doing good and that systemic change. So for us at Oatly, it's focusing on transforming the food system towards one that's plant-centric for both the planet and people's health. And specifically in 2025, you mentioned that we launched our updated sustainability strategy. So I co-led that work, which was exciting times. It's a much more grown up, you could say, more specific, with more long and short term targets, and it's broader. So it really acknowledges the interconnected impact areas in the food system of climate, nature, nutrition, and people, as well as positioning Oatly's climate targets as a climate solution company contributing towards societal net zero. And anything else you might want to know about me? I don't know. I've worked in the sustainability space for maybe almost 20 years. And if you're trying to place my accent, I've kind of lived all over the place, but originally from Scotland, but now based in Sweden with Oatly.
Great. And I was going to ask about how you do this essentially not alone. As you say, Oatly is a purpose-led brand. It really exists with that food systems transformation at the front of mind. And when you hear about the brand sustainability work, the messaging that I see in the media in my inbox sometimes is sometimes from the CEO, from the executive. So how do you and your team work with other functions on sustainability, given how that mission is really important?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a company that is purpose-led with a mission where sort of sustainability is a core part of the company, you can say that everyone at the company works with sustainability and has an impact on sustainability. And interestingly, when we've done internal surveys, the majority of people that why they come to work at Oatly is because of that purpose and mission. But on the day to day, how do we work with the sort of other functions and those kind of things? Probably like many other organizations, we've worked really hard to embed the accountabilities and decision making as deep into the organization as possible. For us, it's really about focusing on empowering the people closest to the decisions and the impact when it comes to sustainability. So factory manager, packaging solutions team, key account manager, they're the ones making the daily decisions and really can have an impact on sustainability. So it's really empowering them. And the other thing that we do, what we're trying to do right now is develop an sort of internal progress to have this like single point of truth every quarter, highlighting all the business decisions we've taken and what the impact those business decisions have had on those kind of four sustainability areas, right, of climate, nature, nutrition, and people, which is definitely not as easy as it sounds. But the idea with that then is for it to have this kind of consistent view for everyone in the organization about the decisions we're making, including the leadership, of course, and the trade-offs being made. And I think the trade-offs is really interesting because sometimes a decision can benefit one of the sort of sustainability impact areas and be detrimental to another, but we need to have our eyes open. And then what we need to also get more into place and what we're starting to do is also say, okay, the lessons learned and to continuously improve how do we embed then decision making in the organization to really maximize that sustainability impact. But it's also a lot about, we work closely with the organization to make them feel engaged and inspired. And coming back to like people join the organization because of join Oatly because of the sort of mission and the purpose. We do spend time with everyone across the organization, really remaining and connecting to people's why they came to Oatly, why they're driven, and to really kind of get connected to that passion to make people feel driven and empowered.
So that's even more January energy, isn't it? Sort of questioning what you're doing in your job and your goals for the year ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to talk about. So, as we've touched on, it was quite a significant year for your team yesterday. So, in that strategy update, Oatly set new targets, including one to reduce emissions intensity through 2050, a new goal to support oat farmers to adopt sustainable and regenerative agriculture, and some more ambitious and more specific targets on things like water efficiency and sustainable packaging. And
Mm.
some people say that setting the targets is the easier part. I'm not going to say it's easy because I know these targets don't just come out of thin air. But now that that is set, what are your key priorities for the year ahead in terms of, delivery?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it is about that meaningful impact, right? It's closing the ambition action gap. We've set the ambitions now. Let's close the gap, and it's really tricky. I mean, coming back, you asked me how I'm doing in the new year, and I think coming back to this sort of giant plan, you could say we have like 50 priorities within the sustainability team, right? And it's kind of everything from it's like the nitty gritty of things as well. It's like continue to embed sustainability, honing IT solutions for reporting, making sure the whole organization partakes in human rights training 101. But really to sort of deliver true impact to our plan, I have managed to scale it down to 5 points I thought would be our key priorities for 2026. And I've sort of split them into sort of two areas. So one are more to supply chain focused actions, and then three connected more broadly to that ignite a movement, which I mentioned, and our spheres of influence. So first priority from a supply chain perspective this year is scaling regenerative agriculture, which you already mentioned. That's very clearly in our plan, and that is for climate, nature, and people. People being farmers in this case. And so really specifically for 2026, we have some very concrete targets where our ambition is then for the regenerative acres farmed of equivalent supply. I need to say that correctly because it's a mouthful. And we're going to go from 2,250 acres from 25 to 3,600 acres in 26. And is that a lot? Well, for our oats from Sweden, that means up to 11% of our equivalent supply acres. And in Canada, it's going to take regenerative oats up to 35% of our equivalent supply acres. And they are our two largest sourcing countries for oats. So it's really tangible targets in scaling the regen ag. Then from a supply chain perspective as well, it is reducing our climate and water footprint through efficiencies in our factories and, alternative fuels and optimizing our network when it comes to logistics, which I think probably the majority of companies and sustainability professionals focus on the day to day, because that's when you get those really quick win-wins and save energy, save costs, reduce impact. But then the other three priorities are about igniting the movement to a plant-centric food system and societal net zero. And the first priority here is the big one, and it's conversion. So at Oatly, our products are significantly less impactful than cow's milk. So, for example, in the UK, the barista is 58% less climate impact than the average cow's milk. And that is similar across all markets. And so we're really focusing on just amazing taste experiences and new product innovations launching. And that really means that we'll see this, hopefully, more people switching from cow's milk to Oatly. And by doing this, reducing the climate footprint of the milk category. So we're contributing with those avoided emissions. The next priority is using our brand and voice to influence the narrative. And this is not an easy one, but I mean, focusing on systems change, I think we can all see the headwinds if you're even willing to open the news at the moment. And the story being told around climate is kind of like no one cares. And this really needs to be challenged. So, from our perspective, and it's not just our perspective, but like kind of politics is downstream of culture. And so we need to work really hard to influence the story, and we need to come together to get the message out there. That it isn't game over, that there are the solutions, and that the majority of people do care and do want action. And I really love the 89% project, which specifically for the UK, for example, shows that 83.4% of people would like to see politicians do more when it comes to climate action. And we need to really mobilize the silent majority. And that's a really kind of broad ambition that we have. And then finally, one that's really close to my nerdy sustainability heart is further socializing the climate solutions framework. So The Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Oxford Net Zero identified a gap in climate frameworks where there was no incentive or recognition for developing and scaling climate solutions. And they therefore built and created the Climate Solutions Framework. So in 2025, we used this, and our products qualified as climate solutions, and we qualified as a climate solution company. But that's not enough. So we need more awareness about this in the sustainability community and beyond. We need more companies to develop, implement, and reward climate solutions. And that's helping society then replace the status quo solutions and get us to global net zero. So there are 5 of the many things we're going to be focused on in 2026. But if we manage to tick off those 5, I think we'll be very happy indeed.
For sure, massive agenda there. And I wanted to come back to one part of that you mentioned, which is the communications, a time in which, as you say, storytelling around climate in general is really challenging. A lot of the language that people have relied on is being politicized. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation around. But then when you look into what people are talking about in terms of specifically plant-based foods and drinks, we've got this sort of policy debate in the EU over what can and can't be called a burger or a sausage. We've got food bloggers online saying, you have to eat entirely unprocessed. So just have dairy milk, just have eggs, just have beef. And I know that Oatly is quite masterful at really punchy communications. So what specifically are you working on with the comms team this year with all of this in mind?
Yeah, we do have a very punchy, creative team, that's for sure. Well, I think firstly to actually my point earlier about conversion and taste. So there is loads of misinformation and disinformation out there, and a lot centered around nutrition. But taste actually remains the single biggest barrier in the UK anyway for entry into the plant-based milk. And so Oatly is really going to focus a lot on taste, continuing to deliver great taste experiences. And this is also going to be really prominent and clearer in our communication and focus this year, together with then launching some exciting new products. So watch this space. But on that nutrition side with the misinformation, we're going to keep tackling misinformation head on. Over the past year, we've been really proactive in challenging misleading headlines and ensuring that accurate science-based information is getting out there. And we're working also closely alongside registered dietitians to help us spread credible information on social media, because let's face it, that's where a lot of people today get their facts and perhaps don't question it so much, and it's not a regulated space. So I'm sure there's going to be more of that happening in 2026. Also, what I found really personally very helpful when being questioned about kind of Oatly's nutrition credentials and being challenged or with misinformation is our Small Healthy book, published in 2025. It's a very cute little pink book, but it contains facts to help guide consumers to feel more confident about their choices. And if people listening are curious about it, there is a web version as well. So if you search for 17 facts about Oatly and nutrition, you'll get that up. And then obviously there's the ultra processed food debate. Just recently or I think at the start of 2026 actually, we've rolled out new packaging that references the debate directly. And Oatly's packaging sides are they're very widely read when on the breakfast table. But the packaging side is all about trusting the process. But it's also a really nuanced debate. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I definitely am aware that all ultra processed foods are not bad. And the current conversation around the topic, I think, is really confusing and distracting. And ultimately, what we really need to be focusing on is the more urgent challenges, right? And we need to be focusing on the solutions needed to transform our food system for our planet to operate within the planetary boundaries and meet people's nutritional needs. So I think there'll be a lot of more fun, interesting and quirky communication from Oatly in 2026.
Great, I'd expect nothing less. And I also wanted to just broaden out and look at essentially external collaboration and external engagement more broadly, because as you mentioned, this really is like a systemic change. It is a way of converting customer lifestyles and habits, but to do that you have to make new habits more systematically accessible. So I know that involves more than just consumers. It involves policymakers, it involves numerous other people, and you've even mentioned like getting dietitians involved with this. So it'd be great to hear what you have planned in terms of external engagement.
Yeah, when it comes to external engagement, I mean, I think you're totally right. We talk about igniting a movement and we talk about influence, but this is something that not only small little Oatly can do, but it is about convening and bringing the right people together, the right change makers, the right policy makers, but also consumers, because we all have a role we can play here. And so I think 2026 is also for us looking to the unusual collaborations, to the unexpected collaborations, and seeing how we can move this agenda together. But a lot of our focus is also on advocacy and policy. Right now, the policy landscape, I mean, there are definitely a lot of headwinds in policy, but we need to really advocate and support policy that is focused on the transformation towards plant-centric food systems. And that's everything from, we need to create a fair playing field. Like, are the foods needed for a sustainable food system of the future equally have the equal benefits and policy landscape that the kind of foods of today have? And we need to level that playing field. And like you mentioned, I mean, we're seeing policies like in the EU with not being able to kind of call a plant-based burger a burger anymore. And I mean, these are kind of where we're seeing really the headwinds against this food system transformation that we need to have for people and planet. So of course we're going to continue to advocate, but I think it's going beyond the policy, because like I always say, culture informs policy, and really doing those broader collaborations.
Got it. And Caroline, just from having had 15 minutes to talk with you, I know you have an absolute host of things to be working on in the weeks and months ahead. So I'll stop it there and let you get cracking with some of that. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on Sustainability Uncovered this month.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great.
Yes, a big thanks once again to Caroline for her time. We're going to take a super quick break now before our second guest interview. Join us after the jingle as we discuss sustainability in pet care with Sarah Heath, who is Group Sustainability Lead at IVC Evidensia. Hello and welcome back to Sustainability Uncovered, the podcast from Edie, with me, Sarah, and also with Sidhi.
Hello.
So this episode is providing you with a handy preview for the years ahead in terms of business sustainability strategies. So having a look at what happened last year, we saw some big high profile target rollbacks, but then underlying that a lot more quieter, just target additions, tweaks or progress updates. So Sidhi, if I were to ask you to sort of make a bet, fill out a bingo card for what we'll probably see in terms of strategy this year, what are you putting your chips on?
I think this is something that we've heard from our audience as well, is the definition of what a sustainability professional is really going to change this year. So from our latest business tracker, we surveyed around 175 people in the sustainability space, and the findings, are telling of what we can expect this year. Half agreed that the descriptor of sustainability practitioner has lost its meaning, and only 27% said they see themselves as an executor, like someone who implements and delivers the ESG strategy. And fewer than 1 in 10 believe they spend a significant amount of time disrupting current business practices and approaches, which was supposed to be the main goal of a sustainability professional at a business. And then going forward, only 1% believe that sustainability professionals should, in 5 years' time, still be dedicating a significant amount of time to reporting, which I know is a big concern for a lot of our audience members. We have only seen more and more growth in the reporting space of more standards coming in, and now with AI and what we have seen happening in this space, I think the focus is shifting, and the conversation is more around actual delivery and action rather than reporting kind of bubble.
Yeah, so it's like people are hoping to foist that off on AI, but also on other functions like finance and compliance and data and comms. So I think what you're saying is there's a lot of big trends there in who should be in the team that is shaping the strategy. Right. So like you say, most people want to spend less time on reporting and data. They want to spend less time convincing the board of the basics and more time actually orchestrating. And so it feels like we're sort of past that age of loud and proud here's a new target. All of that work should give way to, interim targets that are a bit more specific, that are a bit more, I wouldn't say accurate necessarily, but that are to do with specific things, and that are a bit more pragmatic. And then hopefully, like you say, we're getting beyond that age of reporting fatigue.
Yeah, and just from like the latest data research that we have seen, I'm seeing more and more reports, and this is me referring to one of the recent reports from University of Exeter that we covered on our site, and the focus was on how these standards and frameworks have been underestimating the risk, and so like just to get stuck in that cycle of just reporting rather than actually implementing ground action and actually calculating those risks. I think that's the challenge now, which is looking at the most granular data and like talking to your actuaries, your investors, and figuring that out is kind of how I'm seeing like this focus being shifted as well. Another really cool post that I saw on LinkedIn, and this is me just like going on, but another really cool post that I saw on LinkedIn was someone was describing like how there's more interest in like at least my generation to work in this green space, but lack of jobs as well because of everything that's happening politically. And they framed a really great argument, which is every job is a sustainability job if that's your focus, which is how to make it low carbon, how to reduce emissions. So I think the argument was like, this is gonna be something that's gonna be a core function of every job going forward, rather than just a separate department. So yeah, just echoing to what you said, it's become like a more systems thing.
Well, it's like you even look at the sort of language that people are using in reports and headlines on our site. So I've seen like commercially competitive sustainability, pragmatic sustainability, and probably the one I like best is like self-evident sustainability, like with all that risk and all that opportunity to attract and retain and upskill talent. This is just what we need to be doing. So all of this is to segue kind of unceremoniously into our second interview for this episode, for which our guest was Sarah Heath, who is Group Sustainability Lead at IVC Evidensia. So if you've not heard of this company, and I hadn't until a few months ago, they're the UK's fastest growing veterinary group. And working in sustainability in this industry comes with its own unique challenges beyond some of that top level stuff we've just talked about. So it's particularly hard to tackle single-use packaging in an environment when it's needed for health and safety. It's hard to cut your carbon when it's mainly coming from anaesthetic rather than something you could probably phase out. And as we've alluded to, it's really hard to get thousands of busy professionals to understand what their role is and what the key messaging is about the central strategy. So I spoke with Sarah about how she and her team are approaching these issues, how they drove progress on them last year, and what's in store for the years ahead. Here is that interview in full. Yes, so as we all have mentioned in this studio just then, it's great to be catching up with Sarah Heath, who is the Sustainability and ESG Director at IVC Evidensia. So Sarah, thank you very much for taking the time. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
No, thank you for taking the time, especially at this busy time of year. It's almost reporting time, is that right?
Yeah, we publish our sustainability report, our fifth sustainability report we publish on Monday. So really exciting to be sort of sharing that latest update on progress against targets and commitments, and really pleased that we're able to report some really good progress.
Great, and we can dive into some of those facts and stats, but before we do, I don't think you've been on the podcast, so it would be great to give the listeners just a bit of a brief introduction to yourself and what your role at IVC entails.
So I'm, as you explained, I'm Sustainability Director for IVC Evidensia. We're based in 19 different markets around the world. My role is to be developing and implementing our sustainability strategy, which we call the positive paw print, given our veterinary focus, and actually working with teams in all of those countries to manage environmental and social impacts. We focus on using our global scale as a force for good in the veterinary profession, and then internationally for the benefit of obviously our animal patients, for planet, and then for colleagues in the countries that we operate in, and obviously also thousands of communities that we're operating in. So we have 3 pillars, so planet, people and patients, but all very much intertwined.
Got it. So that's a big business, a dispersed business. I'm really hoping that you're not doing all of this by yourself. So how are you working with other people at the business to deliver some of these key sustainability messages and programs when it is such a vast business?
Mm-hmm. So I have a small specialist team at the centre. We help to look at strategy, and then we work very, very closely with our executive team, who are very, very supportive of this. Sustainability is one of our 3 corporate promises. Sustainability, customers and people are our 3 promises. So sustainability is really, really high as a priority for the executive team and the board. And then I work with central functions like procurement, like HR, like our clinical leadership team, in terms of developing policy, tracking impacts, identifying risks, opportunities. It's also where we pilot new initiatives, where we can test new and innovative approaches, looking at the sustainability benefits, and then also looking at the business case and whether they're actually scalable. And then at country level, I have a network of sustainability leads in our core markets, and they then take some of the initiatives that we've tested centrally, and they then work with the teams in their local markets to roll those out. And then taking it one further level down, at local level, our veterinary teams are incredibly passionate about the environment in particular. And within a few months of joining, I actually realised I was getting so many vets contacting me saying, what can we do? We really, really want to do things to support and to reduce our environmental impact. So we developed a clinic toolkit called the Positive Paw Print Toolkit, which gives them really simple checklists on the things that they can be doing. Perhaps takes some of the thinking out of it for them, but gives them the practical things that they can do, whether it's simple things like just turning the lights off when you leave a room, or turning the thermostat down a little bit, or looking at local biodiversity in terms of maybe a bit of pollinator friendly planting, or thinking about prescriptions of certain key pharmaceuticals to actually be mindful of the impact that pharmaceuticals can have on the environment. And then obviously looking at waste, reducing single use, and improving recycling. So those Positive Paw Print toolkits are really, really helpful, and we've now got between 200 and 300 clinics in 6 different markets that are working on those toolkits, and that means that they've got ownership at local level, and they tend to be really, really proud of what they're achieving. So we're working on it at all sorts of different levels of the organisation.
Great. It's really heartening to hear that. That's something that a lot of people struggle with, is, who should have responsibility, where should this sit, what order should this go in? And it seems that the approach that you and your team are taking is already coming out with some significant results. So I've had a sneak peek at some of the things that will be in the sustainability report, and one of them is confirmation of a 20% reduction in scope 1 and 2 emissions since 2022. So it would be great to hear a little bit about the specific programs and changes that have enabled IVC to deliver that.
Yeah, and we're really pleased with the progress that we've made. So that's against our science-based target, which is obviously to cut scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% by 2030. In terms of the focus areas, we've got over 2,500 locations around the world. Making sure that we're on renewable electricity contracts wherever we can is obviously a really obvious one. We've got 85% of our electricity is coming from renewable sources at the moment. Then looking at the building energy efficiency again, and a sort of a fairly basic one, but actually changing the light bulbs in that many practices is a time-consuming project. In 23 and 24, we did a big energy efficiency program across the UK and Ireland, which is our largest market. And then in 2025, we've counted about over 10,000 light bulbs changed in the Netherlands, Canada, Germany, going into France, and at the same time building in heating controls so that we're cutting energy use and emissions. As a veterinary business, about 20% of our emissions come from anaesthesia, the emissions associated with anaesthetic procedures, and so that's been a focus this year. We've invested £500,000 in the equipment that will enable our veterinary teams to actually adopt lower flow rates of anaesthesia, which means that they're using less of isoflurane and sevoflurane, which are the anaesthetic gases that they use in procedures, and that is going to really support our reductions in that area, as well as actually being better for patient welfare, which is obviously a really, really core priority for us. We're making gradual progress in terms of transition of the fleet to electric. It's one that we have to tailor quite carefully. Our farm and equine vets are the ones who use vehicles the most. They travel a very long distance every day. So we know that as the ranges of electric vehicles change and improve, that's going to enable us to really accelerate that transition, but it's one that we're continuing to monitor. And then the final area, we own a network of pet crematoriums, and so there's a real focus there in terms of fuel efficiency. And over the last few years, our teams, particularly in the Netherlands, the UK and France, where we've got big networks of crematoriums, are really, really focused on driving fuel efficiency, and they're seeing savings of around about 25-30% in terms of fuel efficiency, which obviously is cutting emissions, also very good in terms of just good solid business sense as well.
Got it. And you've mentioned some of the businesses like quite niche and quite unique sources of emissions, like anaesthesia. But it would be great to hear as well a little bit more about the Scope 3 emissions footprint. So where is business at on its journey towards measuring and reducing Scope 3 emissions, and how significant are they for IVC?
Like most businesses, Scope 3 emissions are sort of the biggest part of the pie. They're about 90% of our emissions. So supplier engagement is an absolute focus priority for us. We're lucky to have some really, really close partnerships and collaborations with some of our largest suppliers. We know that they're also working on their own emissions reduction plans, and so it's very much a collaborative way of working. Our focus is actually working with our largest suppliers to ensure that they've got their own greenhouse gas targets in place, ideally science-based targets, and that they're tracking their own progress, and that they can move to a place where they can share their emissions data with us, which will obviously help us to improve our reporting. Like many businesses, we're actually making the transition from spend-based emissions to actual data, and we know that as we get more accurate data, that's going to help us in terms of tracking the real impact that we're seeing. We're also working with suppliers, to focus on some of the key steps that we know that we've made, that actually we know will make a difference to them. So simple things like changing to renewable electricity for their manufacturing sites. Many will already have that on their agenda, but that's something that we can build into conversations. And then where it's appropriate, we're keen to encourage them to look at LCAs to enable them to really pinpoint some of those specific changes, maybe just quite small changes that can actually make a very big difference across their carbon footprint. We have a small but growing white label range, and obviously that's where we can work very closely with our suppliers there.
And Sarah, before we move on from emissions, I'd love to touch on what's next in the journey towards those all-important science-based targets. And I know you mentioned some key Scope 3 bits there in terms of both data approaches and supplier engagement, but is there anything else that's really up there on your emissions to-do list for 2026?
I think we will continue to come back to anaesthesia. As I said, that's a big part of our footprint, and that's one where we really need the engagement and support of our veterinary teams, and it's something that they're really passionate about. Particularly, they know it benefits the environment. They know it also benefits the patients that they're caring for. So it's an absolute no-brainer, and that's one that I was in the Netherlands last week visiting, talking to the team there about it. Similarly, across the Nordics, we've got teams that are really passionate about looking about this. So that rollout of lower flow anaesthesia and more sustainable anaesthetic solutions will be a real focus. Plus, we've got some trials coming of different pet cremation solutions, which are lower carbon. So things like aquamation, hopefully looking at electric or hybrid crematorium furnaces. And then, as I said, supplier engagement, working really, really closely with our group commercial team, who we're lucky are incredibly supportive, and actually making sure that that is really, really a core part of our dialogue that we have with our suppliers.
Interesting is that some of these things are really the same as what I'm hearing when I talk to healthcare businesses that operate for people. So it seems like it's less niche and more of a big conversation. And then something else that I pick up in conversations with healthcare is on essentially how on earth you cut waste and reduce single use while maintaining patient welfare. And I know that the report is going to include some progress in that field. It would be great to hear about what you've been working on.
Yeah, waste is the thing that our clinic teams contact me about the most. It's the thing that really upsets them because, as you say, sterility is our key priority. That is core to patient welfare. So it means that a lot of surgical equipment, for example, will be wrapped in single-use plastic, and we use single-use gowns and drapes in surgery, but cutting that waste is a real key priority. On one level, we're looking at improving the way that we manage waste at the end of the process. So we're centralising contracts, we're focusing on zero waste to landfill, increasing the amount that's recycled. So the UK is one example where, we're zero waste to landfill. We've got about 54% that's recycled. The problem that we have is actually some of those flexible plastics, which I think is, as everybody knows, is just really challenging in terms of recycling. We also know that endless segregation is just really difficult when you're busy. So actually what we want to do is to cut waste at source. And this is where I think I mentioned at the beginning some of the trials that we can do. We're actually working with some of our big suppliers on this, but we're trialing different solutions. So during the year we've been working on a trial of reusable surgical gowns, working with a company that's designed gowns using a really innovative polymer, which gives very, very high standards of hygiene and patient care, but it's also helping us to actually cut out single-use gowns. So we did a trial in 35 UK practices during the year. It eliminated about 14,000 disposable gowns, saving over 2 tons of waste. And so that's literally just a fairly small trial in the UK. What we're always very focused on is actually we're in over 2,500 locations around the world. If you then multiply that across all of our global locations, the impact is very significant. There are other kind of small changes that we've done, and something called kennel liners that sit at the base of the kennel when you've got a pet that is in there for treatment, maybe recovering from surgery. Typically our clinics have used single-use kennel liners. It's a really easy switch to go to reusable kennel liners. Within just the first few months of trialling it in the UK, we'd saved over 100,000 kennel liners. So it's really obvious in terms of the wins that we can make. And what my team are permanently doing, working with our commercial team, are looking at where those opportunities are. And it's great that there are lots more out there. So very much cutting waste at source is what we want to be focusing on.
Great. Well, Sarah, we've covered so much ground in our chat already, and I'm conscious of time. But before we bring the recording to a close, is there anything else that's on the horizon for 2026 for you and your team that we should be keeping an eye out for?
I mean, I very much hope that what you'll see is more of the initiatives that I've talked about, some of the trials actually rolling out to more of our markets across our global network. And then something we're really keen to be doing is to be sharing the learnings that we have. We work with Vet Sustain on a really innovative exhibit at London Vet Show in the autumn, which actually helped to pinpoint all of the changes that could be made, all of the learnings that we have in terms of the small changes that you can make, and then some of these more innovative waste reduction trials, for example. And we're looking to keep sharing those kind of learnings with the wider veterinary profession. As I say, coming back to that real mission to use our scale as a force for good, to be improving sustainability across the veterinary profession.
Great. Well, do keep us posted on some of those trials and some of the technologies that you mentioned. I know a lot of other businesses are grappling with to solve some of the same issues, even beyond vet care. So we'll have to catch up later in the year. But for this podcast, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Yes, huge thank you once again to Sarah for her time. So that is all of the speaker interviews for this episode. But before we go, I did want to give you a preview of some of the things that we're working on and some key dates for your diary. So firstly, our editor, Matt, sends his apologies for missing the recording. Today, he's still busy squirreling away on our membership offering. So if you would like access to our exclusive content and to bi-weekly online events where you get to collaborate and dive into some of these topics a bit deeper, do check out our membership page. For the collaborations, upcoming topics that Matt is going to steer some discussions on include developing corporate climate adaptation strategies and delivering sustainability projects on small budgets. So both things we've talked about today. Sidhi, do you want to give the readers a little preview of what you're up to in the next few weeks?
Yeah, sure. So something that I'm working on is like a wider reporting standards feature, as I mentioned earlier, which is probably going to be a crash course on what to look out for in the reporting space. And just to add to that, UK sustainability reporting standard is going to be a big one. So going into February, we'll have more editorial content on that. And that's something that I'm working on to kind of clarify for our audience what UK SRA is, how is it different from existing standards, and like how it will impact their reporting process. That's one bit. And then also, you know, ahead of ED26, we're speaking to our speakers. So really good content there as well that I'm working on right now, which I'm really excited about. So lots happening actually. I know it's just been like 3 weeks since we've been back on desk, but so much happening.
There is a lot going on, and I'm having to prioritise focusing on ED26 as well. So this is our biggest event of the year. It's taking place on March 25th and 26th in central London. We've confirmed more than 150 speakers, including John Elkington and Sherry Madeira, and we're hoping to see about 1,000 of you there. So do have a look online, and it'd be great to see some of you in person at that event. As for me, I always have my mind on podcasts as well. So next month's episode here will be all about the practicalities of setting science-based targets. So that's lots for us to get on with in the next 4 weeks or so. But for this episode, it's a goodbye from Sidhi.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.